1 in 4 people in the UK alone consider themselves to be digitally excluded in some way, shape or form. That means that they can't really fully participate in what is now a very digital society. That might be because they're simply older and they haven't kept up with new technologies. It might be because they're geographically isolated and they have little to no internet connectivity, or it might be just because they're disabled in some way. Whatever the reason, it's a large number and it's growing. Happily, there are people who are very serious about changing that. 3 of those people join us on the Tech for Good podcast today. They are researchers from the University of Plymouth, and for the last 2 years, they have been running a project devoted to developing new and innovative technologies, not for the digitally excluded, but with them. Today, we're going to find out all about what they've been doing. Today on the Tech for Good podcast, we're welcoming a veritable gang of guests rather than the usual one, and they are Dr. Rory Baxter, Oksana Hagen and Marius Varga, all research fellows at the Centre for Healthcare Technology at Plymouth University. Now, it's nice, as always, to have a group of scientists on a podcast, but there is a specific reason that we're having a chat today, and that's because you're just winding up a project that is as interesting in its process as it is in its conclusion and its results. And so we're going to talk about all that. In summary, though, just to give my understanding of what we're talking about, the Centre for Health Technology has been running a project called ICONIC, which is all capital letters, and I will allow you to tell us what that actually stands for. But it has been an innovative co-design process with members of the community in the Plymouth and the southwest of England area. And that co-design process has tried to develop technologies that have those people at the very heart of it, so that the end result of that process are prototype technologies that are entirely novel, but also, interestingly, entirely useful potentially for those people. That's my understanding of it, but we'll get into both the process and how it works and what the results have been. But Rory, I'll come to you first. What does ICONIC stand for?
So it stands for the Intergenerational Co-Design of Novel Technologies in Coastal Communities.
Of course.
And in a nutshell, the project is, as you say, all about co-design and all about trying to create new technologies. So I'll let Marius and Oksana talk about those technologies in more detail, but broadly, they're all about trying to support people's access to community, to heritage, to environment through technology. And one of the core rationales behind conducting this research is around seeing if we can use the co-design process to support people's digital inclusion through getting people to think about technology in a different way, seeing whether that can then support their ongoing access and use and engagement with different technologies.
Yeah. And digital exclusion is right at the core of the whole project. And I think that's something that the Centre for Healthcare Technology has been really focused on for quite a long time. Just to define digital exclusion for a second, that is the advancing landscape of technology, especially now including things like AI and so on, is moving at such a pace that there are quite a lot of people who don't engage and then get kind of left behind. And the number of people that accounts for is growing. And I think I've summarised that neatly enough, Rory, haven't I? That is a central point of this whole thing.
Pretty much. The formal definition is around people being unable to participate fully in society due to technological barriers. So these can comprise things like people's digital skills, if people don't feel comfortable using technologies, if people simply don't have access to the devices. For example, if people are socioeconomic backgrounds that might be more deprived, they might not have access to things. And as a consequence, they miss out on social and important resources and services to just live one's life, basically.
Yeah, and healthcare and well-being being obviously central to the mission of your department, if you like, at Plymouth University. So what we've seen here is a project that I think it's lasted for about 2 years, up until round about now. And I guess what you're now in the process of doing is collecting together your data in order to actually present that in proper scientific ways and so on. But very briefly, before we come to Oksana and Marius to help us dig into the details of what you've been doing, what has that process involved?
It's been a long process. So it's involved recruiting almost 100 participants to join our workshops. We held, I think in total, over 50 workshops over let me quickly work out the math, sorry. Should have had this prepared. Something like a 17-month period of time, possibly longer, maybe 20 months even. And yeah, that requires a lot of coordination, a lot of goodwill and understanding from participants, importantly, and they've been brilliant consistently. So even if we've been running evaluation sessions with people that haven't been involved in the co-design to see what essentially people naive to the project think about the technologies, we've had such a wonderful reception and welcoming from all these different communities in Cornwall and Devon. It's been fantastic. But yeah, as you say, at the moment, we are in the process of formally writing things up, working out exactly where to submit things and get things out there and let people know about the work we've been doing and what the important ramifications are from the work we've done.
Yeah. And my understanding is that those workshops and that co-design process was about engaging the end users of technology innovations from the outset so that they could define really what it was that you were going to apply yourself to. So quite different to, I guess, I'm assuming, a normal academic approach to something where it's applied science in the field, if you like, from the get-go, right? And there were four. This ended up being focused in four areas, right, which we can talk about. But the headlines are there were 4 prototypes delivered. One was a social game that was developed in concert with those end users. There was a project around underwater telepresence, which is particularly relevant to the southwest and Plymouth in particular as a coastal community. There was an XR app, which involved a prominent heritage site nearby that provided an interesting level of access to medieval goodies that people wouldn't normally be able to get at, and a really interesting AI assistant that was far more specific and helpful to people than the usual AI assistant. So let's dig into each one of those. Marius, let's start with the social game. So you collected a bunch of locals together, and they became game designers. Is that about right?
Yes, except Rory collected all those participants. He was very helpful with that. I just guided them through the process. But you're right. We got people with no experience in the game design whatsoever. Typically, older generation who sometimes look at game design as something outside their realm. So we had some introduction to game design in a playful way that actually brought them on board, and together we managed to design a social game around seagrass growth. Together with our partners, which are basically Blue Meadow team at National Marine Aquarium.
Yeah, National Marine Aquarium being a nationally recognised institution in Plymouth that's run by the Ocean Conservation Trust, right? And Blue Meadows specifically being a unit within that that's looking at seagrass. Now, if anyone didn't know what seagrass is, it's kind of important. It looks like grass, doesn't it? But it just sort of waves around underwater and provides a home for, God, I know, thousands of different species. Vastly important ecosystems, but also incredibly useful carbon sinks to lock in carbon and help us solve those problems. But it's an environment that's been ravaged by us humans, largely, I think, through pollution, but also dragging anchors and generally messing around with things. So the game was all about that. And that's obviously directly relevant to people who live in those kind of communities. How did that start, though? How do you get a group of people that might not have even played a game, let alone know what designing one is all about? Like, how did you take steps through that?
So the initial workshop was introduction to games through creating a small board game, something that participants, they didn't have a lot of experience with. So we started to go through principles of game design. We put together 5 simple principles. We didn't want to make things too complicated. And for each principle, we had a hands-on activity where the participants built one section of the game, a simple game board kind of approach. And in the end, after an hour and a half of designing these small games, they all got to play each other's games, and it was a lot of fun in the room. There was a great vibe. And at the end, we kind of took that process that we went through to design the game board, and we say we're gonna apply this to seagrass to our actually game that's gonna span, unlike this, over a few, an hour and a half. It's gonna span over a few weeks, so even months, I should say, because it took about 6 months to put together the whole thing.
Right, and ultimately you ended up with a playable game, a multiplayer game, in fact, if I'm correct.
You're absolutely right. It's a multiplayer game. It's a social multiplayer game that's using an underwater environment, that the game mechanics and the interaction within that specific environment was all co-designed by our co-design team of intergenerational, both adults and young adults as well. So that collaboration within the workshops enable us to end up with a game actually that's playable.
Right, amazing. So now what though? You've got a prototype now. I've been involved in the games industry myself. I know how hard it is to take a game from a concept to something that's fully tested and releasable and playable and so on. So you've got a prototype, but the hope presumably is to now take that on and explore more with that process.
Yeah, that would be great. We're looking forward to build some collaboration with local groups or local developers, I should say. Hopefully through a social enterprise or something similar that will enable developers to pick up this prototype, the core, the essence of the game, and turn it into a commercial product. As you might think, we didn't get to the commercial level, unfortunately. It was such a short time and only one developer overall. So it would be great putting in front of a team of actual professionals who can do this and turn it into a commercial product that will integrate within the local community and actually was developed by local community. And then hopefully that will span to different areas of the country and ideally the world, where we can promote this seagrass as a tool of, as you rightfully said, about capturing carbon and building a local ecosystem for local flora and fauna.
Absolutely. And then more broadly, of course, there's just the concept of working with local people to develop a game mechanism that you can kind of zero in on something that's particularly relevant locally, that is driving local people to want to do something with that mechanism. There's all sorts of ways that you could explore that as a kind of idea in all sorts of subject areas, in locations where they might have a specific interest in a specific thing, right? You could apply the same. Anyway, it's fascinating. So it'll be interesting to see who might be interested in taking that forward. But we could dwell on that all day. But let's move to Oksana and actually talk about the next idea. And the next idea was wet, by the sounds of it, but it was underwater telepresence. You'd think that, or a casual assumption might be that people who live in coastal communities get wet all the time, but actually that's not really how it works. So what was the goal of the underwater telepresence project, Oksana?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say wet, because the whole project is surrounded by the fact that we don't want people to get wet, actually. So we want them to experience the positive side of being underwater, aside from being cold and wet, without the necessity of actually going through those ordeals of, first of all, financial investment, time investment, and potentially also for some people, just physically, they wouldn't be able to do scuba diving. So we wanted to take all the good things about the underwater space and take away all the bad things and all the unpleasant and barrier-like things, and just present them with an experience that is for them therapeutic, educational, and also just enjoyable.
Yeah. And so I think ultimately this was a co-design process as well. You worked with a cohort of local people to develop the ideas, but ultimately it ended up involving a VR interface and some actual underwater video capture and things like that, right?
So in the end, we had quite a bit of crossover between my project and Marius' project. That was not on purpose at all, though.
Right.
So in all of this process in Iconic, we went with, we tried to stay as truthful as possible to the co-design principles, being that we try to not restrict our co-designers in what kind of technologies they actually want to create, what serves them best, which of course is difficult from our perspective because for once, I never worked with VR before, but we brought a lot of different technologies to the participants, flat one, VR one, synthetic one, real recorded underwater spaces, all kind of things that we could come up with. Recordings with sounds because participants said that they want to experience sounds. So anything that they mentioned that they wanted to try, we tried our best to provide them with that sort of experience. And then based on their feedback, we tried to collate a prototype together. And that prototype entailed VR. And based on the people that they really felt that was the best way to feel immersed in that space. And also that was the best way to kind of communicate we had this come up a lot of times, this otherworldly experience of being underwater.
And where was the water, if you see what I mean?
So yeah, we also decided not to decide it as researchers. We gave it to our participants to decide. And they were quite excited about exploring local area, saying that, well, I mean, other people can focus on building applications for things like the Great Barrier Reef and, real famous underwater spaces. But we would really like to focus on what we have right now, right here.
So I think that involved the Ocean Conservation Trust as well, right? As a partner. And I think didn't you explore going out to sea almost as well? You explored that as a concept. What does the actual prototype ultimately involve there?
So we also did provide our participants with one quite interesting experience. We have an underwater robot, which we assembled here. And we allowed basically our older people without prior digital experience to operate that robot in a real scenario in the sea and to see how it feels just for them to do that. And we did have overwhelmingly good positive feedback from that, but still participants, they had a little bit of friction there because they really wanted the prototype to be focused on accessibility, so it will be possible to take it at any time, any place, maybe a care home, maybe a school. So that turned out to be much bigger priorities than being able to play with a robot underwater. So in the end, the prototype is really an application which we have developed also with Marius' help to an extent, where a person puts on a headset and they can see a stream. It has to be a live stream, although we didn't deliver that. A stream of recording from inside of a national marine aquarium, one of their tanks, which is dedicated to a local underwater landmark, Eddystone Reef. And people can look around, that's of course important bit, but also they can point out at things that they see, like fish and maybe some seaweed, and they can find out more about those things underwater. There are also some gamification elements which were also co-designed together with the participants. But the core idea is that we wanted to deliver this educational, stimulating experience for people to be able to learn more about the underwater space.
Right. So ultimately, people put on their VR, they get to experience a whole different angle. Maybe they're familiar with the aquarium already, but they get to see it from a whole different angle. Maybe they can't get to the aquarium because they've got limitations of some sort or another. Maybe there's now a way that they can experience that. But it seems like the aquarium's got something to benefit from this as well. It's a whole new way of interacting with their stuff. So you can see how this might be applicable beyond this point and developable beyond this point. So what's your hope for this down the line?
So we have a lot of synergies indeed with multiple organizations here and multiple initiatives that we have in Plymouth. So right now, part of what we have developed, we are hoping, in any case, that it will be taken forward by Ocean Conservation Trust within their upcoming project called Ocean Voice. And additionally to that, we had some interest from National Marine Park, also here in Plymouth, to work with the robot direction of the project. So there is quite a few synergies there between what we have done and National Marine Park, Ocean Conservation Trust, and hopefully that will be taken forward. Additionally, because we had this AI angle to it and the idea that we want to recognize the underwater species, it turns out that actually it's a very underexplored area of development. It's very difficult to actually deliver that kind of application due to multiple technical problems with that. And we had some interest and some projects starting within the university where they are interested in the footage that we have actually collected to look into detection of the species, identification of species, and also learning more about behavior of animals from that footage.
Wow. Yeah, there's a spider web of applications coming off that.
Well, yeah, just probably important to note that because if you think about it, it's a 360 application. And if you put it inside of aquarium, which is also a locked space, you can track any fish at any time, almost. So you can really draw some very significant conclusions about what it does at what time. So it poses quite an interesting perspective for biologists to work out that kind of thing.
Yeah, wow. Hadn't even thought of that, but yeah. Because who's looked at that before in any similar way?
Yeah, it's quite a tricky domain in many regards. Yeah.
Fascinating. What is also fascinating, though, I'm trying to come up with the neatest segue imaginable here, but what's also fascinating is the heritage of the area that you're working in, so the southwest of England. I know part of the reason that Iconic was even imagined as a project in the first place is because the southwest of England and the Plymouth and the surrounding areas are great test beds when you're looking at something like digital exclusion, because it's quite digitally excluded. The population is older than average, more dispersed, more rural, etc. Lots of those ingredients for digital exclusion. But one of the things it does have, of course, is this marvellous heritage. That's why all the tourists go down there and block up the A303 on the way past Stonehenge and drive everyone crazy. That they all head down there on holidays, and they're going there for places like Coteil, which I think I'm saying right, is a medieval property of the National Trust, which anyone, if you're not in the UK, that's a national charitable organisation that hoovers up a lot of the old heritage buildings and so on and preserves them in the public interest. Now, Marius, tell us a bit about this. You came up with an interesting VR-associated way of allowing people to probe medieval stuff in ways that they've never have before. And you came up with that idea in the same kind of co-design way, right?
Absolutely. Actually, it was participants' idea. I wish it was mine. I just channeled their knowledge basically and their requirements. But the idea was we wanted to create a space similar to Coteil in a virtual world for participants or for people who can't travel to that location. We wanted to give people a sense of being in that space. And for that, we needed a team of co-designers, obviously some local participants, again, an intergenerational mix. And first thing, what we did is to try and capture this space visually. So we use a 360 camera to capture a few rooms in Coteil, important rooms, and amongst them was the Great Hall in Coteil, which is a beautiful space with a lot of artifacts, historical artifacts on display. And on that first experience, on that 360 video experience, participants unanimously basically wanted to start interacting with things, to touch things, to grab things, to look at them in detail and so on. Something that you can't do actually when you go to Coteil. You're not allowed to touch absolutely anything, which is kind of good for us in a way, because we can create that unique selling point for our application, but at the same time, there's a reason for that in real world, obviously.
Yeah, everyone had a lot of fun with it by the sounds of it. And I'm guessing that there's an end product that is clearly of interest to those people. I bet they didn't want to put it down, right? And I bet the folks at the National Trust were kind of interested in it as well. Where does it stand now?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fun project to do. one element that we wanted to add a bit of authenticity to the whole experience, and what we've done, we worked closely with National Trust and with the team at Cotil to scan some of their historical artifacts and bring them into the virtual experience. So we spent a bit of time in Cotil, which it was great, just grabbing all these artifacts and using photogrammetry, which is an approach of scanning real world objects and turning them into a digital version. We transfer some of those objects in the Cotil experience, and that made a big difference, as obviously participants felt like certain genuine artifacts were there. We did not copy absolutely everything because we didn't have the manpower or the resources to do that, but it's something that can be done in the future. I think there's a lot of scope for that, to bring that genuine kind of digital version of Cotil online, if obviously National Trust want to look at something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know it's something I would love to do, because anyone who's had a wander around an old stately home or an estate somewhere is familiar with the red rope, the barrier that you can look at old things that smell slightly funny, and then you're back out into the carefully manicured gardens, whatever it is. But you really want to get up close. You want to touch it. You want to know. That's the kind of impulse here, I guess, behind the co-designer's idea, and it seems so plausible that would be of interest to people like Cotil and other similar sort of heritage tourist attractions. So what's the goal now? How would you like to see that move on?
Well, for the future, as technology progresses, we'd like to make this experience a bit more real, if you will. Right now we have a multisensory experience where we use visuals, audio, and haptic feedback for interacting with objects or grabbing anything. That's limited in certain ways because of the controllers that we use, the limitation of technology itself. But we would like to bring this into a higher level of immersion. And typically that comes from adding a narrative around the whole experience. As suggested by participants in the co-design, one of the last co-design workshops, having sort of an escape the room experience, where they get to uncover clues within that space, within that room, by using all these artifacts, and obviously, hopefully, successfully escaping that digital version of the room. And that's something that's been put forward by the participants without any interaction from us or suggestions from us. This is what came from as a natural occurrence after they explored the space.
Right.
So bringing that multisensory experience within that kind of space would be great for the future. We made everything in an interactable. You can grab absolutely anything from the walls, from the table. We have a table full with, it's like a feast with all kinds of food and drinks and so on, all artifacts that they can grab. And that's kind of the unique experience for this.
It was really, really fun to see the last workshop we had with a full prototype, and we had the participants just walking around the room in a headset and quietly laughing to themselves, like doing things in virtual space and quietly laughing. And we couldn't take it off them. It was really fun to see.
Well, do you know what? That's why other people should be interested in getting involved and continuing the development of it, isn't it? Because
that was really fantastic.
That's the reaction.
To see. Like, because at the beginning they struggled with it sometimes, but once it was smooth and developed, they were like having so much fun.
There's all sorts of educational angles on it as well. As a kid who grew up in this country, another memory I have is those school trips where you're on the other side of the rope and it's all a bit dry, but boy, if I could reach out and grab a sword off the wall, then I would be really interested in it. But we could talk about this forever. There's one more project that was involved in the Iconic initiative, and that involved AI very directly. And Oksana, you might be able to tell us a bit more about that. But this was a particularly local application of AI that seemed like a brilliant idea when I first heard about it. Why don't you tell us about that?
This project I'm about to talk about is more practical. It's a bit less fun, I guess. Okay, I'm lying. Our participants were great, and they had a lot of fun as well with this project. So here we tasked ourselves with a very, very practical problem that we have here, and it's connected with also lack of social care within our UK system right now. So the idea being that at some point, I think, I don't remember how many years ago, but a while ago, we have came up with this idea of, the government came up with an idea of social prescribing. The idea that for quite a few conditions, let's say, or quite a few things that people sometimes go to surgery with, would be much better treated within the community, within specific groups that can support those things, within specific other services. So that was a famous example of people doing gardening and that's helping their depression. Or we have support groups for diabetes, at least 3 in that small town we're working with in St. Austell. So the idea was that if we redirect people, instead of going to NHS for everything, into those local services or in groups and support, we would have less pressure on NHS. So the trick there is that we actually then increase the pressure on link workers, the people who are supposed to direct people into those alternative services. And the response to that was to develop a digital application, and there are quite a few of them in the UK. There's Joy Up here, where we were working with Help at Hand, a local application developed together with NHS Surgery in St. Austell, which collects all of the information about those services. And I'm not sure exactly how much, but much more than 600 of those things exists only in that tiny area around St. Austell. So it's a tremendous amount of support that's available for people for a variety of different things they might be facing. Maybe they're carers and they need support for that. Maybe they have autistic child and they would like to meet up with some people that also have autistic children, learn something from that. So this kind of groups, this kind of support services, they're available, but they are difficult to access if you don't have application on your hands, if you don't have access to internet, if you don't want for some reason, if you don't have a smartphone. So multiple barriers towards still accessing those services, which very well might be there. So here we got really lucky in this project because, as everybody probably knows who's listening, of course, we had tremendous developments in the field of natural language processing with tools such as LLMs, large language models, and everybody would be familiar with ChatGPT in this case. So we were really lucky that those things started happening just as we started the project as well. So we were able to jump on that train and make use of large language models to build essentially what is a digital directory service. So instead of looking up things online and searching it in a normal way that we used to do for the last 20 years, you would be able to just phone a normal phone number and talk to a voice, which sounds very similar to a natural human voice, and ask them about what kind of service is available for your particular issue. And you would be able to come back from that interaction with a list of phone numbers, list of contacts, details such as where it's held, how much does it cost, when, all sorts of things like that. So in a way, it is a very simple application. It's not trying to take a lot of privacy issues and things like that. It's just giving information that's already available about local services and helping bridge that digital exclusion bit that exists in this field.
Yeah. And if my understanding is correct, the concept is it's a phone number. And it's as hard to access this as it is to just dial a phone number. And that seems to me almost the genius of it, which is, especially if you're looking at an older generation who have sort of the whole smartphone, AI, cloud compute, online banking, all that stuff just kind of passed them by, and they're still, and we're not talking about a small number of people. This is a very large number of people who still want to do what they're familiar with, and dialing a phone line is obviously an incredibly familiar thing for everybody. And so you've now got to a point where you've built the fundamental structure of it, I guess, and you're able to demonstrate that. But I guess there's quite a lot more you'd like to do with that, because I guess there's a vast scope of different services and things that you could deliver through that mechanism, right?
So yeah, there are two bits to it. So first of all, if we just focus on this particular application, there is a lot that needs to be done to actually take it from this prototype to a production scale thing that potentially could be deployed nationwide. And we are hoping to be able to develop in the next few years. In this case, the things that need to be done is that we efficiently link the services, that somebody actually maintains those databases, and that we have also a provider, possibly an enterprise, a local enterprise, that would be supporting the digital application itself. So we have a prototype, we know how it should be done, we have a lot of feedback from our participants, but we need somebody to properly maintain it over time. So that will be another stage of the project, and we're really hoping that we'll get additional funding to do that. And additional thing is, of course, I had some interest from other people within the field of, NHS. And yeah, I should have had a list of organizations in front of me. But the idea being that, a lot of NHS services also are app-based, which is not ideal for many people. Especially here in Southwest, we have problems with internet connection a lot in smaller rural settings. A lot of the time you don't have internet connection, that's quite normal. So for people to be accessing those services reliably, it would be good to have that kind of phone number that would be able to tell them when the appointments are, maybe, when they should come in, confirming, just admin stuff, easy admin stuff, and that would reduce the pressure on the NHS already.
And you can see that not just in the NHS, but all sorts of different areas where the existence of sophisticated LLMs and a phone line can answer all kinds of problems for a lot of different people with varying reasons that they maybe don't engage with fiddly little apps on fiddly little phones all the time and struggle with that kind of thing. So it seems like there are endless possibilities there. So that's another reason to be hopeful, I guess, for the future. Now, Rory, you've been sat there patiently while we've been talking about all those technologies, but if I could come back to you just to broaden the picture slightly. The goal now for Iconic is to try to take all of this work, and not just the work of yourselves and the rest of the Iconic team, obviously, but the work of the participants, the designers, if you like, as well, to take it further. So how would you define that, your goal now?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the case. As you've heard, we've got 4 prototypes, all of which can do quite wonderful things, and they're all generated by some quite wonderful people who supported us throughout the whole workshops. And it would be amazing for us to be able to continue this co-design trajectory for each of these technologies, or to explore how we can begin to apply some of these technologies in different areas, whether that's, for example, taking the underwater telepresence and looking at integrating some of that detection that's in that with, for example, the heritage technology and things like that, to give people a kind of a virtual readout of what some things that they might be picking up are. So there's essentially so many ways in which each of these can go. And the beauty of what we've been doing is that is the user-centered design, really, because we've tried to stay as neutral and as unopinionated when it comes to the design and development. And as Marius and Oksana were saying, letting the participants steer exactly where things were going. So this is of course quite an important thing in terms of acceptability and accessibility for technologies, to understand what the user's needs are. And there's just so much more work to be done, and we're very open to further collaborations as well, because whilst we've been supported wonderfully by our partners like Codesign National Trust, the Ocean Conservation Trust, as well as partners who've helped us with recruitment like Cornwall College, like some of the community partners we've been working with in Cornwall and Devon. Again, we've got such fertile ground from which we can begin to take things further in many ways. And part of that will be looking at research funding. So Oksana mentioned we have a bid in to take things further with the Voice AI, but we're also happy to work with other partners as well who might be non-academic, to see how we could potentially develop things further. As Marius was saying with, for example, the social game, working with local game developers, seeing whether there's any interest there to take what we've done and expand it to a fully polished commercial product that could be accessible and could again be built in collaboration with some of our existing partners. So yeah, it's very difficult to sum it up neatly, because as you alluded to, Ron, it's a bit like that web of so many things going in so many directions. There's so much potential from what we've done, and it's all thanks to our participants, because they've given us such wonderful ideas. And looking at their sort of journeys along the project, it's been brilliant to see how, for example, some people's confidence and use of different technologies has changed since they've taken part in the project. So we've had people who joined the project who may have only been comfortable calling people on their phone and not using anything else, but by the end they might be doing all sorts of things. Even to the most techie people, it might seem quite basic, but for these people, that might be conceived as a huge step and really beneficial to them, to allow them to do wider things, even if it might be something quite basic like doing Wordle every day, or even just downloading some apps to engage with local services more easily. But yeah, it's difficult to sum it neatly, as I said, and I didn't do a neat job of that, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's such a landscape open, I suppose, in front of you guys, and I guess it starts with a conversation. But there are all sorts of different people that might be interested in this as well. It seems to me there's the academic side of it, which I guess you're pulling together now. There's the co-design process itself. Now, I know I spend all of my time talking to people involved in big companies doing big technology things. They could learn something from this process by not just being user-centric, but by being user-involved from the very beginning. That's going to be interesting academically. That's just that part. But then you obviously are able to directly tackle digital exclusion amongst those participants, as you were just saying. A direct benefit of this is that you've reduced digital inequality in your area. Like literally, you have the data. That's what's happened, and then finally you have these potentially commercializable products that come out of the back of it. And so there's this real circular value going round and round in there, and it seems like it's wonderfully interesting, and lots of people should be involved. But if they do want to get involved and see this develop, how should they approach that? Presumably there is a website. We'll definitely include a link to it on Tech for Good. But what would you say? Presumably you just want to have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So the university is very good at obviously sharing researchers' contact details. So we'll all be listed on the website for the Iconic project on the university's website. So I mean, just starting with a conversation, seeing which bits might give interest to so many different people. Because as you've discussed, there's so many ways in which you can go. There's so many benefits potentially to what we've done, and we'll be more than happy to share the expertise that we've learned, as well as potentially involving some of our partners with wider projects as well, even if we're a conduit for supporting some of our partners to engage in new and different things that they might not normally have access to. Then again, that's a wonderful output from the project, even if it doesn't directly lead to any academic output. So it's that's been one of the really brilliant things about this project. It's not been purely academic, it's not been purely theoretical, it's been very applied, and it's been so refreshing to see that we've had real positive impact, I should say, on people's lives.
Yeah, we've had a really negative impact on everyone we've dealt with. No, I think it's the opposite of that story. But great. So I mean, we've had a really nice overview of the outcomes of all of your work for the last 2-3 years or so, and very much hope that it can carry on. But in the meantime, we'll accompany this podcast with lots of links. People should go and check it out. We will have demonstrated some of what we were talking about during the podcast as well, of course, but there's more to see. People should follow those links and start a conversation if they've got any interest in co-design, if they've got any interest in innovating technology on a hyper-relevant level, and if they've got any interest in addressing digital inequality, which they should have, because we all should have. But thanks very much, folks, for joining me today. It's been a really interesting chat, and I hope you succeed in all of your ambitions going forward for this.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.